It's a great pleasure to be speaking to this committee. It's a great pleasure that there is such a committee for Canada. And it's absolutely marvelous to the focus on science and research. I'll introduce myself briefly. I completed my graduate and undergraduate training in water sciences at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon, and then worked for NATO, the US, and Canadian governments as a research scientist, and then at the University of Wales in Aberystwyth in the United Kingdom. I was attracted back to Canada in 2003 by a renewed science and research strategy that led to the Canada Research Chairs Program and a substantial increase in Tri-Council funding for academics. This made Canada a warm, welcoming place where one could more confidently pursue large-scale, world-class research. Since that time, I've led or co-led 5 national research networks and some international initiatives, and I conduct research on water, particularly the impacts of climate change on water resources of cold regions such as Canada, where snow and ice are vulnerable to the warming temperatures. And coming from the Saskatchewan and the Prairie provinces, where drought is always on the horizon, and we even have dust storms in the prairies occurring this week. It's a massive issue for the West, and how we manage and predict that water, how we steward that water, how we understand it, and how we make sure that it's available there for our ecosystems, for our communities, for our Indigenous communities, for food production, industry, energy, are very, very important issues for us. Over the years, I've observed Canada build up a really enviable system of supporting and encouraging university-based science and research. The dependence on university researchers for science production in Canada has grown. I started off as a government scientist, and I wouldn't want to be one right now as budgets have declined over the decades. But it's better at the universities. However, there's a risk to this dependence on the universities as it's structured right now. We lack the long-term means to sustain our national prominence in research areas, and other countries have these mechanisms in place. Here's what I mean. In the UK, there are these NERC centers that combine academic and government research on strategic topics over long periods of time, decades of time. In the United States, there are cooperative institutes between the federal government and universities that again function over decades and sustain long-term research objectives. In Canada, we don't have this, and my colleagues and I have worked on issues of water and climate and water pollution since the early 1990s. It's been made even more pressing by climate change. And we found that we've had to establish 6 different research networks across the country to do this with 5 different research funding agencies. We call ourselves acronym surfers because every 5 years or so, we have to reinvent ourselves a bit. We have to learn a new funding agency. We have to bring in new sources of support for this. And it's precarious. It's also inefficient and takes long periods of time. And it's a great worry. We know that water is life. We know that Canada depends on water. And if we can go back to John Palliser's expedition in the 1850s, where this first came to prominence as a government report. So this is something that should be straightforward moving forward. Right now, the network I lead is called Global Water Futures. It's funded by the Canada First Research Excellence Fund, which is a marvelous amount of funding for science research. It's based at the University of Saskatchewan in partnership with Waterloo, Laurier, McMaster universities, funds over 200 professors at 18 universities, and we've hired 1,100 students and researchers to transform Canada by finding ways to better forecast, prepare for, and manage our future water in the face of dramatically increasing risks. Global Water Futures is positioning Canada as a global leader for water science, and we work throughout the world. However, after a 7-year run, Global Water Futures will end like any CFRF network next year, and there are no renewals. So there are no similar large science funding programs that could sustain our refreshed global leadership in water science in Canada. This is a precarious position indeed. I propose a solution to acronym surfing and research instability like this, not more big chairs to bring in people from outside of Canada to do things at the end of their careers, but sustained collaboration between the federal government and universities through development of our own cooperative institutes between consortia of research universities, federal government departments, provinces, industry, communities, First Nations, and other partners. These cooperative institutes would sustain a long-term focus on issues of long-term national importance and bring to bear our national scientific resources, our laboratories on these issues to sustain big science and global preeminence in strategic areas of particular benefit to Canada. In the area of water, perhaps the upcoming Canada Water Agency could be a federal facilitator and leader for this, along with the natural science departments, tri-council agencies, CFI, and others. A Canadian Cooperative Institute in Water Sustainability with the universities. I'm sure there are many other worthy topics of this long-term strategic support and collaboration between federal science departments and universities across this country. And we could stop acronym surfing and get down to answering the really dangerous questions that we have right now, the scary ones. How do we predict and prevent floods, droughts, poisoning of our Great Lakes, decline of our fisheries, safe drinking water for our Indigenous communities, and other problems. So anyway, I wrap up there and look forward to taking questions from you. And thank you for